Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe Traina. Welcome to the 15th installment of Please Join Me. I have with me today a very special guest and a very dear friend of mine, Simon Jones. I would like to, by way of introduction, read some of Simon's CV. One role that looms large in his career, and we'll talk about it in a little while, is Arthur Dent in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which he originally portrayed in 1978 on radio and then later on television in 1981, and has variously returned to that role over the years. Simon also played the role of Donald Shellhammer in The Miracle on 34th Street. Watched the 1947 version recently, and really comic turn with Shellhammer and Mrs. when they try to get Kris Kringle to live with them for a little while. Also, Simon played Lord Brideshead on Brideshead Revisited, and more recently, King George V in the Downton Abbey film. Simon also appeared in the Brideshead series years ago, and I saw him, and I didn't recognize him. I'm sorry, Simon. When I watched The Black Adder recently, and you appeared as Sir Walter Raleigh, I said to myself, he looks familiar. This dashing, good-looking man, and it is about 30 or 35 years ago, isn't it, Simon?
It certainly is, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry that I didn't pick you out of a crowd, but you were great. I found you to be, right on comically, and yeah, I immediately afterwards went and smoked a pipe.
I had a full head of hair in those days.
Yes, so did I.
Mm.
And I just want to briefly touch upon your career, your education, and then you can tell us anything you want about it, of course. We can talk about whatever you like today. You went to King's College, Taunton. Mm-hmm. Then you went up to Trinity Hall in Cambridge, and you were a member of the Footlights with Douglas Adams, who's an old friend and colleague, yes?
Yes.
And you also appeared, as I know you and met you, in many Broadway plays, including The Real Thing, Benefactors, Getting Married, Private Lives, and when I met you in Ring Round the Moon at the Belasco Theater, 1999. And you've also appeared extensively in Blythe Spirit, with Angela Lansbury. And you have a lot of off-Broadway credits, and you were nominated in 1990 for the Drama Desk Award for Outstanding Feature Actor in a Play for your role in Privates on Parade. And you're a very prolific audiobook presenter, having lent your voice to various works, such as, including The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, The Salmon of Doubt, I keep wanting to say Salmon of a Doubt, A Slight Trick of the Mind by Mitch Cullen, which won the Audio Publishers Association's Audio Award in 2006. And I am going to stop there because obviously, having had such a long and illustrious career, there are many, many more credits. I want to thank you for joining us today, and tell the listening audience, please, what you're doing right now.
Well, at this precise moment, I'm extremely lucky, given the circumstances worldwide, in that I am actually a working actor. And I am only too keenly aware of that fact. This was, in fact, set up, well, shortly after, I suppose, we finished doing the Downton Abbey movie in England. The producer, Gareth Neame, who is the grandson of Ronald Neame, who directed The Southern Avenger, and Julian Fellows, the author, and Michael Engler, the director, all put their heads together and said, we need a butler for this new series we're going to do, The Gilded Age, set in New York in 1880s, but we don't want him to be much like Carson. Who can we have? And they put their heads together, and they were all apparently simultaneously said, Simon Jones, he'll be the one. I think they also rather appreciated the idea of bringing me down from King to Butler. But I can tell you.
They didn't want you to get too used to being in the royal family, right?
Well, I can tell you I'm making more as a butler than I ever did as a king. So there's a moral there, I think. Anyway, so here I am. I think one of the chief advantages was the fact that I do live in New York, so they didn't have to pay to bring anyone over. So they have brought a couple of people over anyway. And we're filming here in Queens and Long Island under strict COVID conditions, anti-COVID conditions. I've so far had 46 COVID tests, which is extraordinary. But none of them went into my brain. They were only swabs of the nose, which makes me wonder why you have to have one that goes into the brain. Sounds a bit sadistic to me. And so we have been filming since October the 1st. We were supposed to start on March 17th, and one did begin to wonder whether they'd ever get going. What's interesting about this series is that it'll be 10 episodes set in 1880 on East 61st Street between Central Park and Madison Avenue.
Not far from where you live.
Not far from where I live. I did walk down it the other day and was horrified to see there's not a single building that dates from that period at all. I mean, the south side is occupied by the Pierre Hotel, and the building above, I think maybe the Metropolitan Club. Anyway, none of the buildings of the period of 1880. But that's, by the way, the cast, when we met for a read-through on March the 3rd, astonished me because it seemed to be a recap of my entire career and a reunion of everyone I'd possibly worked with. Cynthia Nixon and Christine Baranski. The three of us all appeared in 84, I beg your pardon, in The Real Thing, directed by Mike Nichols. And little Cynthia was but a little girl in those days. Dear me. And it was fun to see them again. And then all sorts of people. Donna Murphy, who was in Privates on Parade with me. Katie Finneran, with whom I worked, I can't remember what on. Oh, yes, I know, at the roundabout. You Never Can Tell. And Bill Irwin and Michael Countryman. And,
oh, gosh.
an enormous list of people, and we've just been joined by Nathan Lane. So it's like old home week, and it's great fun to work on.
I'll bet. Now, would you like to tell us anything about the plot, a little bit about that time period? I know it well. Some of our listeners, maybe not so much.
Well, the 1880s, of course, is the period of the robber barons and the struggle, as it probably always is, of those people who want to keep things as they are, the old money and the new money rubbing up against it. And I don't know how much I can actually tell you because I'm not supposed to disclose too much.
Of course.
I may have told you too much already, but I can tell you we're hoping it'll come out in January 2022 at the latest. But
right.
We are going on filming until May, June, so and quite a lot will have to be done to give extra floors to some of the buildings that they've built in the exterior set, but only go up to a certain height. Those extra post-production effects.
Right.
So anyway, I'm delighted to be doing it, and I can't believe how lucky I am. And I think it's probably kept me sane, or not, as the case may be. Judgment.
Well, now,
interestingly enough, I had to grow a beard for George V because they wanted a beard, and I certainly didn't want to have it stuck on, though I didn't know what shape it would grow in. And to my astonishment and delight, it grew in exactly the right shape as George V. And the makeup department was simply thrilled. And I thought, right, now I can shave, look at least 10 years younger. And I'm afraid the team said, no, we'd rather you kept it, actually. It looks rather period. So I'm still bearded. Not bearded, but I'm a bearded. Yeah, I thought that was a bit unusual, but it doesn't seem unusual now. I mean, it's a full set, the moustache curled up at the ends.
Yes, you folks can't see it, but it's quite George V. And I have given to calling Simon Your Majesty, as I also did Helen Mirren whenever I saw her after she portrayed the Queen.
Yes. Unfortunately, of course, now when people meet me, instead of calling me Your Majesty, they'll just throw their coats at me.
Well, as long as the tips are good.
Well, exactly.
Right, right. So let's go back, if you'd like,
Mhm.
to closer to the beginning. I guess one of the obvious questions to ask is, why did you and when did you decide that you wanted to be an actor?
Well, yeah, the answer is quite simple, actually. My then headmaster's wife at my high school um, cast me as old Marlowe, and she stoops to conquer. I have no idea why. So I have, in my amateur days, I did play older people all the time. Anyway, and I got a bit of a taste for it. Even that, it's not a very interesting or significant part. But then I got cast as the Father Provincial in a rather complicated play. They had to choose plays with all men in those days because it was an all-boys school. Um, though I have to say, She Stoops to Conquer had some very good drag artists in it,
Mm.
even though several of them had rather deep voices. Um, and I did a play called The Strong Are Lonely by Fritz Hochwalder, about a Jesuit colony in Paraguay. And I had to play the Father Provincial who decided he'd built heaven on earth and then realized to his horror that he'd actually created hell on earth, and had a long and drawn out death scene after he'd been struck by an arrow or by the people he was looking after, set in South America. And there was a moment while I was doing my death scene and I paused and I realized that everyone in the room was listening to what I had to say. And it was an unnerving moment of revelation. I thought, well, this is probably the only way. And I don't know, this is giving me rather a kick. And so I sort of said to myself, I think I'd like to do this as a profession. Of course, the family were a little dubious. My great uncle Fred said, I think I seem to remember you were interested in the law.
Ah,
And no, I wasn't interested in the law remotely, but I actually took it right up to the brink. My interview at my college, the law tutor, John Collier, said to me after a few minutes of interview, he said, you've no interest, competence, or aptitude for the law. Why are you here? And I said, Uncle Fred, he said, well, don't be silly. Go away and read. What is it? English. That'll do. Off you go. That was my interview. So I read English. Now, English is an interesting subject. You either write it, I suppose, criticize it, teach it, or speak it. So I thought I'd speak it. Other people find it's a bit easier. Not quite so agonizingly creative, facing blank pieces of paper. So that's what I decided to do. And so I did 23 plays during the 3 years I was there. I said to a Don afterwards, who were the tutors there, I said, were you a little alarmed at, or are you ever alarmed at what people do? They said, no, we don't mind, as long as we feel you're spending your time creatively. And as long as you come out with some sort of a degree. And I did. I came out with a perfectly decent second. Not a first, magna cum laude, but it was a perfectly serviceable second. They're divided into threes, and after that, forget it. And by that time, I had decided what I wanted to do. And that's when I joined the Footlights Club, following the footsteps of John Cleese and David Frost and Eric Idle, and legions of people who had contributed to light entertainment in England. And I was, in fact, in charge of auditioning new members when Douglas Adams came along and wanted to join. And I liked the silly sketch that he did. And over some opposition, I said, yes, he must become a member. He wanted to become a member for some time, and it had been frustrating to him. Anyway, I didn't think any more about that, though we became friends, until years later, when he called me up and said, I've written a science fiction radio comedy show with you in mind. Would you be interested in playing the main protagonist, the last survivor of Earth's destruction, a man called Arthur Dent, who by profession was a local radio producer? A little detail people tend to forget. And I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, I thought for about half a second and thought, yes, I think I can fit that into my otherwise completely empty calendar. And so off we went. And that was in 1976, 77. We did the pilot in 1977, can you believe? And Arthur Dent has followed me all through my life. We have the odd reunion. Plans are still for another tour. We had 2 tours in the early 20 teens.
Why don't you tell a little bit about what the play is about?
Oh, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Well, Douglas always wanted to start a series with the world coming to an end and then moving from there. He thought it was a good way of clearing the decks.
Right.
And Arthur Dent is in bed in his cottage when he hears the sound of bulldozers knocking down his front gate. And he rushes out in his dressing gown, which is only something we realized when we did the television. We didn't realize what he'd be wearing. That's why I wear a dressing gown in the television version, and everyone thinks of Arthur Dent as a man in the dressing gown. But it was only because it became visual. I rush downstairs and say, "What are you doing?" I lie down in front of the bulldozer, and my friend Ford Prefect, who is not, in fact, from Earth, but is a reporter for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a rather interesting prophecy that Douglas came up with. It's a device that you hold in your hand, not unlike a cell phone, and can give you any information you choose to know about matters in the galaxy. And he came up with this in 1977. So he was a reporter, and he said, "Look, come with me. You need to come to the pub. Something rather more important is going to happen." So I follow him, go to the pub, and the Vogons arrive to announce that the Earth is about to be destroyed to make way for a hyperspace bypass. And I'm a bit appalled at that, but he makes me drink 3 pints of beer and several packets of crisps. And we hitchhike a lift aboard the Vogon constructor fleet, and adventures follow thereafter. And the humor really basically depends on taking ordinary everyday irritations and turning them into cosmic irritations. I can never find a decent cup of tea wherever I am in space. The problem of people always losing their pens is that they slip through wormholes in space and occupy a planet where they live very happily, the far spiral outer arm of the galaxy, and so on and so forth. And we did a first series, and such was the demand that the BBC, very unusually, broadcast it again immediately. It's not something they ever do. And then we did another series, and Douglas was persuaded to write the novels. And much to his surprise, the novels became worldwide bestsellers and are still worldwide bestsellers. He said it was like, dare I say it, coming to orgasm without any foreplay. I mean, he was there. He hated writing. It was a torment to him. At one stage, he was locked into a hotel room by Sonny Mehta, who then later became a very leading light in publishing in America. He was locked because he'd so passed the deadline. He said he used to enjoy the sound, the whooshing sound of passing deadlines. And well, Sonny Mehta did not. So he locked him in a hotel room in the Berkeley Hotel in London. And as he typed each page, he whipped them out of the typewriter and sent them off to the printer. So it's amazing the book is coherent at all. But it was the only way to get him to finish it. Anyway, Douglas was a good friend of mine, and then he suddenly died in the year 2000, at the age of 49, while working in a gym, which has made me keep out of gyms ever since. Not
Yes,
really.
I shun exercise whenever possible myself. Now, you also had a relationship with some of the Python gang. And in fact, I'm reading here, which I did not touch on before, that at one point there was a play called No Naughty Bits, which had to do with, if you want to talk about it, your wife Nancy's lawsuit against ABC. So would like to talk a little bit about the Python experience and how actually it came to that particular, I guess, point in the relationship. Also, I also want to acknowledge and remember your late wife, Nancy, whom I knew well, who was a lovely person. I believe she passed on 2019.
Yep, December 2019, a year ago.
And just a little over a year ago, and she was the, let me see if I have this right, the American liaison for the Python group?
She was the American manager of the Monty Python.
Right.
Was entirely responsible for them coming over to this country, because they tried all other means, and everyone said, Monty Python, I don't get it. English humor doesn't transfer to America. It's a waste of time. And she persevered, and by hook or by crook, got them. I mean, it was a complicated business to even get them onto television, because in those days, of course, there were two different lines, as there still are, but it wasn't easy to transfer a video from England to America, because they have different codes. 62, I can't remember the lines. Anyway, and it was very expensive to do. Now, of course, it's not an issue, but in those days it was. So she had to actually, find ways of selling little bits and pieces of it so that it could be paid for, and then she could transfer some other stuff to American tape. The whole reason for her involvement was that she worked in the music business for years. She was publicity for The Who and Genesis. And she was over here when Charisma Records, who had Genesis and Monty Python, was bought by a company called Buddha, for whom she then worked. And Buddha had a stack of LPs of Monty Python. And while Nancy hadn't watched them in England, she loved listening to the records. And she said to Neil Bogart, who was the man who ran Buddha, "Do you mind if I push these out to disc jockeys around the country?" And he said, "I don't care. They're mine. It doesn't cost me anything. If it interests you, do it." And so she did. She sent them out to various countries, disc jockeys all over the country, a lot of university radio stations. They played them, and lo and behold, people found them absolutely irresistible, sight unseen, without even seeing the sketches. And this was the evidence that Nancy needed, that this myth about American humor and English humor being so different could be exploded. But the reason I became involved in Monty Python was that we were doing the film of Privates on Parade. We did it in, the jungle scenes were filmed in a woodland in Surrey, just south of London. If you see it, it looks a bit like the jungle, but only because we had a portable yucca yucca plant, which we moved around to various pots in this English wood, and covered ourselves in sweat. And I don't know whether we convinced anyone, but we were in the Malayan jungle, but never mind. The part of Major Flack, who was the commanding officer who leads this luckless troop of vaudevillians into the jungle to certain slaughter, was originally played by Nigel Hawthorne on stage, who became extremely famous later. But he was not considered box office at the time, so they gave the part to John Cleese. And John played the part in the way that he would normally play an authority figure. And it's fine. And we got to know each other and talk endlessly, because there's a lot of waiting around in filming, as I've rediscovered during the Gilded Age. And at the end of the filming, he said, "I think we haven't covered all the topics we want to talk about. Why don't you come and play an extra part in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, which I'm now going on to do?" He says, there are 6 of us, and sometimes we write scenes that involve 7 or even 8. I said, yes, certainly. So I then became involved in The Meaning of Life, and you can see me in a couple of sketches towards the end of the movie. And working on that film was their American manager, Nancy Lewis. And she had the combination to the hospitality fridge. Immediately got to know her, and we realized we liked each other a lot. And we were married in 1983. And I did a few other odds and ends with different individual Pythons. I was in American Friends, a film of Michael Palin's, Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and 12 Monkeys. And we got to know them well, and still do. And years later, a play was put on at the Hampstead Theatre Club called No Naughty Bits, in which, much to Nancy's astonishment and delight, she was actually portrayed by an actress called Charity Wakefield. And Harry Haddon Payton played Michael Palin, who was better known for his roles in Downton Abbey and for playing My Fair Lady, most recently at Lincoln Center. And somebody else played Terry Gilliam, who I'm afraid to say I can't remember his name. And there was that very surreal experience of going to the theatre and seeing someone you know being portrayed. I mean, it must have been even odder for her to see herself being portrayed. There were 1 or 2 deliberate inaccuracies, which she resented strongly. But the story was, interestingly enough, Oh, that she was employed by somebody else, and she was answerable to a boss, and she wasn't. One or two odd things like that. And but the judge's comments were taken from the transcript of the trial, and it was a landmark trial. Nancy discovered that ABC had bought several, the last series of Monty Python that John Cleese was not in, and had decided to broadcast them as two specials, but also decided to go about it with a pair of scissors, cut out all sorts of stuff they didn't understand, which meant quite a lot, actually. And for example, the Flying Montgolfier brothers, I don't know whether you know that particular sketch, but it says at the beginning, they got up in the morning, they washed their hands, faces, and their naughty bits, and went off to get into their balloons. Well, they decided naughty bits was desperately risque and bleeped it out. So it sounded infinitely worse. Hands, faces, and bleep, bleep. Well, goodness.
Right.
And this sort of thing, the thing was completely mutilated, and Nancy actually had the foresight to tape it. And of course, by dint of some complication, managed to get them to be able to see it in England, and said that at least Gilliam and Palin should come over and they should sue ABC. And it turned out to be a landmark case. The judge, whose nickname apparently at college was Monty, which was kind of funny, was a man with a wry sense of humour, and he particularly wanted to see the courtroom cases that had been chopped up, both before and after. And they were a bit risque, but they were fun. And the judge said, look, ABC did buy this in all good faith, and so they must be allowed to screen them, but I strongly urge you to appeal. And they did, and as a result, it became a landmark trial in that it gave authors control over their scripts and diminished the license of people to be able to do what they like with the script after you've written it. And the rights reverted to the Monty Pythons, made them all extremely wealthy. Unfortunately, Nancy didn't have a share of that, which was a bit of a pity. I think written in a percentage, but there you go. You win, you lose.
Right.
But it was a really worthwhile thing to do, and it was fun to see it as a play. And hence, no naughty bits, you see, the title of the play. Couldn't have naughty bits, had to be bleep bleep.
Is it done in revival anywhere that you know of?
It hasn't been done since. It never was done over here, which is a pity. It's worth it just to hear the comments of Judge Morris Lasker. There was a funny story at the end where they were, in truth, which they didn't do in the play, where the Pythons and Nancy, the two of them, were going on the subway, and they couldn't find any tokens between them. And the judge came down and was just going through the turnstile and said, "What's the problem?" Said, "We can't get onto the stage platform." So he said, "Oh, I've got some spare tokens." Gave them to them. It's a rather satisfying conclusion to the trial. But I think that was the last picture at our wedding of them all together with Graham Chapman, who died shortly after.
We also lost one of the talented members of the troupe. Year and a half ago.
Yes,
Terry.
Sure. Yes, he died. Terry Jones died shortly after.
Terry Jones.
And yes, that was sad. He hadn't been with us for a while. He had a form of dementia. Michael Palin used to see him very often. But it's the extraordinary thing for someone who was so eloquent and so verbal. It shut down his capacity to speak, and that was a tragic end.
You in touch with any of those folks, and were you or are you particularly close with any of those folks still?
With Michael Palin and Terry Gilliam, yes, and Eric's been in touch. I can't say the same for John Cleese. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't even hear from him directly after she died, which was a little weird. But he has become a bit peculiar. I think I can go as far as to say he's sort of become the characters he used to mock when he was a younger man. And I think I'll go as far as that and not say any more.
Well, okay. So now let's talk a little bit about, we can talk about Blithe Spirit if you like, because you had a bit of a run with that here and abroad. Am I right about that?
Yes, indeed. I had a long relationship with the director, Michael Blakemore, who I'm glad to say is still with us. And Michael has had a very distinguished career. He actually won the Tony for Best Musical Direction and Best Play Direction in 1 year. Kiss Me, Kate, and what was the other? Copenhagen, maybe. And I don't think that's ever been done before. I got to know him, believe it or not, and we're back to Privates on Parade. I was cast in Privates on Parade after a straight audition for the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1978, so that's a long relationship too. And I played a particular part who was always suffering from prickly heat and taking offense, a character called Eric Younglove, who always threatened people with bunches of fives when he felt he'd been insulted. And we did that there, and we did a run at the Piccadilly Theatre, and then there was a movie. We made the film. But in the meantime, Michael Blakemore also directed me as Lexi in Candida, Bernard Shaw's Candida with Deborah Carr, can you believe?
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites.
Yes, lovely woman. She particularly loathed Charlton Heston. She'd just done Long Day's Journey into Night with Charlton Heston, and she couldn't bear him. So when it was her birthday, we filled her dressing room with images, including a whoopee cushion. Chuckles, as she ironically called him. Anyway, be that as it may, and it may well may. I worked with him subsequently on Benefactors here on Broadway, and he was the one who cast me in Blithe Spirit. So it's a long, fruitful relationship, certainly from my point of view. And Blithe Spirit was great fun because, of course, the great Angela Lansbury carried us through. We had an interesting cast over here with Rupert Everett playing the part of Charles, and we did that at the Schubert,
right?
And then we went. Then there was a tour in London. We had a lovely run in London, and then we went on a limited tour around the country, Los Angeles, and where else did we go? Toronto. Yes, Toronto in the coldest winter they'd had in years. Couldn't wait to get out of it there. 2 weeks of absolute misery where all we could see, well, it's a bit like we are now. All you could see was were our eyes. Now, of course, we have to wear COVID masks. In those days, it was just to stop our faces from freezing. Actually, wearing a COVID mask in the winter is not a terrible thing to actually have to do. Let's keep the lower half of our faces just a little bit warmer. Incidentally, by the way, on this TV series I'm doing now, if I were to meet any of the crew in the street, I wouldn't recognize them were they not wearing their masks, because I don't know what the lower part of their faces look like.
Right.
They always wear masks and visors. Extraordinary thing, isn't it? I mean, they may have beards as long as mine, or as short as mine, or even longer, or whatever. I don't know.
I think there's a market. I think there's a market in folks having masks that actually are somewhat photos of their faces. I've seen that done up kind of comedically by a couple of friends, and I'm surprised no one's thought to cash in on that yet.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how unimaginative people have been with making masks. Just some sort of awful logo is fine, but it's not. I've seen some eye-catching ones, a pair of fangs or bottom half of the skull, but that's finished. I made one of my own. I had an inspiration one day, and I went down to Jack's Dollar Store, and I bought an outsized bra. And I cut one cup off, used the elastic, and turned it into a face mask. And I have to tell you, the wire structure in it kept it away from, your mouth. I thought it looked terrific. My son said, if you go out wearing that, I will never speak to you again. And the one day I did go out, several people said, what's that you're wearing? So
I'll bet you were very popular. And did certain folks give you their phone numbers and encourage you to call them?
No, I think they'd run a mile if they knew what I was wearing. It was it's not a success, so I didn't patent it. I don't expect to make my fortune out of that one.
Now, would you like to talk about your talented son, Tim?
My talented son, Tim? Well, he again is very fortunate. He was, of course, furloughed and fired by his company, and then they rehired him, which was kind of gratifying. But in the meantime, he got a job from a friend of his in California, writing copy for an online marketing company. And it turned out he hadn't done it before. He had to go at it, and it turns out he's rather good, and they keep sending him new assignments. So good. He's now earning his own living, which is great. He always has been in different fields, but he got awfully tired of the hospitality business, and I don't blame him.
I don't suppose he ever had aspirations to follow in your footsteps.
Well, if he did, I think it was because he just wanted to be. He wanted to be on television, just like that, as so many people do. They don't quite realize what you have to do to get there. I think quite a lot of people just want to be stars, and sometimes people can be if they're suddenly discovered, but it's very rare, I would have thought. I must say I'm enjoying doing television after these years and years of doing plays 8 times a week. Much as you have a lovely community and you enjoy doing it, and the audience is different every night, and so are you. There is something about getting this done and then knowing it's done.
And of course, theater's a hell of a lot of hard work and stamina required. It's a bit more like a marathon or an athletic event. I did a little extra work, as you may know, and television is. Now, there's a certain, sometimes lengthy periods of waiting.
Endless lengthy periods of waiting. Yes, I think you're taking up knitting or needlepoint. I've got to do something past the time. I can read, but that's always being interrupted when they suddenly say you're needed on set. But if I was doing something with my hands, I don't know what. I'm still going to have to try and think of something interesting.
Now, growing up, as you did in, I will say, the late 50s into the 60s, yes.
Yes.
The British theater was undergoing something of a renaissance because it was away from the drawing room comedies and of Noel Coward and the murder mysteries of Agatha Christie, and with the advent of landmark plays such as Osborne's Look Back in Anger, and actors coming up like Burton, and Dirk Bogard, and all of that crowd. Did you find they were influences on you, because your career hasn't exactly followed that trajectory from what we're discussing?
No, not really, because after I got married to Nancy, and she was the American manager of the Monty Pythons, it seemed silly not to come and live over here. And I was very lucky because I had done 2 shows that people were capable of recognizing and appeal to different constituencies. I could have done 15 years on soap opera over there like Coronation Street or Casualty, and nobody would have known who I was over here. But interestingly enough, people knew about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, an interesting section of the community. I still can go into studios, and the engineers, regardless of their age, will hear my voice and suddenly go, tilt their heads. I know that voice. Because an astonishing number of people actually were brought up on The Hitchhiker's Guide. I say that now because I found that out when we were on tour. People would come to the stage door and say, my grandfather introduced me to it. How old am I? So that's certainly been popular for all ages. And the other thing was this big cult period TV series I did called Brideshead Revisited.
Yep.
Which
I've seen.
Yeah. It caused people to change their Sunday night agendas so they could see the latest episode. And so with those credentials, I was able to come here and people knew who I was. It's like if, a Downton Abbey person came over here, people would know who they were. So that was luck, because I didn't really intend to come over here and work. It wasn't particularly high on my agenda. I'm awfully glad I did, of course, and I couldn't have been happier.
Who would you say that, as you were developing as an actor, that you did look to and you did want to say, well, that particular artist is someone that I would like to perhaps glean or develop, or appeals to me in becoming accomplished actor?
I would say my earliest fan fixation was probably on Alec Guinness,
please, one of my favorites. I've seen so much of what he's done, and many, many times.
Whether I could be, anything like as good as him is not even to be discussed. But at the same time, what I have discovered, and it took him, he said, a lifetime to discover, was that the less and less he did, the more people appreciated it. And I've found that as I've got older, I act much less. And I seem to continue working, which is rather interesting. I think television demands less of you as an actor, or more concentration anyway. More concentration, but less physicality. And after all these years of being in the theatre, it took an effort to bring it all down. But I did know what I needed to do. There's a rather good video of Michael Caine about acting on television or in film. And he's very, very helpful. And I happened to watch it by chance. Not that I'm influenced by Michael Caine in any way, though several people used to say when I wore a particular kind of glasses and didn't have a beard that I reminded them of him, or was I Michael Caine? I thought, no, please, no, not remotely. But then they kept mistaking my wife for Meryl Streep, and sometimes quite aggressively accused her of being Meryl Streep.
It can help you to get the better tables in fine restaurants.
Well, I suppose so. They must think we've gone under an alias. Is that the idea?
Now, my last question for you, because I know you also have another commitment in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but what do you hope to do toward the future? I'm sure there are things that you would like to pursue beyond your current project, The Gilded Age. Maybe you have things in the works already.
Well, maybe I'm rather hoping that The Gilded Age will prove to be sufficiently popular that we'll do 2 or 3 series. My son says, I want you to do 6 series in the movie, and then you can go. And I said, by that time I'll be ready to go. I want to leave him with proper inheritance. So I don't know, what about my actual artistic? I've realized so many of them, oddly enough, without actually necessarily making a splash, that I don't know what else I really want to do. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to do at this time of my career. And Nancy knew about it, so she was pleased that this is going to take place.
Well, it's wonderful it's worked out so well, because it's not always the case.
No, not at all.
And knowing you the way I do, you certainly deserve it. I know you've worked very hard. I've enjoyed not only, of course, your work on the stage and film and television, but a dear friendship that is, I looked back, it's over 20 years old.
Well, I suppose it is, probably.
Yeah, credit to you for having hung in that long. And I attribute that to the fact that we don't see each other very often. So a little of me, as my wife will say, a little of me goes a long way.
That's right. They're married couples who'd never see each other at breakfast.
No. It's true what they say. Absence does make the heart grow fonder. I've been speaking with Simon Jones, my dear friend and a wonderful actor who has had an illustrious career spanning a number of decades in television, film, and certainly on the stage, and several decades, at least 1.5. And we try not to date anyone here on my program. And I want to thank him very much for making himself available. And I wish you well, Simon, always in life, in your endeavors. And please send my love to Tim.
I shall.
And this is Please Join Me with Joe Traina. I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Simon Jones. I hope you'll tune in again next time. And everyone be safe out there. And thank you very much.
You've been listening to Please Join Me with Joe Traina. Be sure to listen anywhere you get your podcasts. Keep up with joetrainamusic.com for news and new episodes. You can listen to Joe's latest recording, Tip of the Hat, on all major streaming services and wherever fine music is sold. This episode was produced by Caroline Voigt.